Millionaire didn't touch a woman for 20 years until his new assistant made him feel again. His pulse stopped the moment her fingertips brushed his skin. 20 years. 20 years of never allowing anyone close, not a handshake, not a hug, not even an accidental touch. And yet, one brief moment shattered it all. As Olivia stood frozen, apologizing for something she didn't even understand, Nathan Kingsley felt it. Not fear, not disgust, but something far more dangerous? Need. For the first time in 2 decades, he didn't want to pull away. And that terrified him more than anything ever had. The halls of Kingsley International buzzed quietly that morning, though no one dared raise their voice above a whisper. The tension wasn't unusual, not when Nathan Kingsley was in the building. He ruled the company with surgical precision, his presence like a cold wind cutting through every room he entered. Employees exchanged nervous glances, wondering if today would be the day someone crossed the invisible line no one dared approach. Everyone knew the rule. He didn't touch women. Not a handshake, not a brush of the shoulder, not even an accidental graze. For 20 years, Nathan Kingsley had kept a perfect distance. Physically, emotionally, and otherwise. And today, Olivia Harper walked straight into that silent storm. Her heels clicked softly on the polished marble as she followed the executive assistant through the endless glass corridors. She felt the stares. Curious, almost sympathetic. As if everyone around her already knew something she didn't. Claire Benson, the executive secretary who had summoned her, gave a tight smile. "You'll do fine," she said, but there was hesitation behind her eyes. "Just follow his lead." Olivia nodded, adjusting the folder in her arms. She hadn't even officially met him yet, but already his shadow loomed large. Inside the executive dressing room, Claire's voice lowered. "Quickly. He needs a tie. Grab one and take it to his office." Olivia blinked. "Just pick one?" Claire's smile was strained. "Pick the right one." The cabinet door creaked open to reveal dozens of silk ties, perfectly arranged by color, pattern, and fabric. Navy, black, gray, burgundy, striped, solid, all lined up like soldiers awaiting inspection. Her stomach tightened. What color would a man like Nathan Kingsley wear? Cold, calculated, untouchable. She hovered for a moment, then panicked, gathering half the collection into her arms and hurrying toward his office. The door loomed ahead like a verdict waiting to be read. She knocked softly. "Come in." His voice was low, even, and impossibly controlled. She stepped inside and saw him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. Sunlight painted sharp angles across his chiseled face. Dark hair perfectly groomed, tailored suit jacket resting on a nearby chair. Every inch of him radiated wealth, power, and that chilling sense of detachment people whispered about in hushed tones. He finally turned, his gaze dropping to the pile of ties she clutched awkwardly to her chest. "What is that?" he asked, voice flat. "Tie, sir." She swallowed. "All of them." He stared for a beat longer than necessary, like he was trying to decipher whether this was incompetence or intentional rebellion. "Give me one." Flustered, Olivia dumped the pile onto his desk, quickly sorting through the heap. In her rush, she accidentally grabbed a patterned tie, one with tiny, ridiculous rubber duck prints. Her eyes widened. "Not that one." He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She fumbled for a safer choice and finally extended a simple navy blue silk. He took it from her fingers, but instead of immediately putting it on, he paused. The silence stretched. Something in the air shifted. As he looped the tie around his collar, Olivia watched with growing discomfort. He was tying it completely wrong. The knot was uneven, twisting like a tangled vine. Her instincts overrode her caution. "Wait," she blurted softly, stepping closer. "You're doing it wrong." And without thinking, without considering the invisible wall everyone had warned her about, her hands reached up. Her fingertips grazed his neck. The moment her skin touched his, the air seemed to fracture. His entire body went rigid beneath her touch, like a current had surged through his veins. His breath hitched. The room, the city, the world seemed to vanish for both of them in that instant. Then, abruptly, He jerked back violently, as if her fingers had burned him. Olivia froze, eyes wide. I was just fixing your tie. I'm so sorry. Nathan's chest rose and fell with sharp, uneven breaths. His hand rubbed at the spot she'd touched, like he was trying to erase the sensation. But it lingered, and he knew it. That was the problem. You touched me, he whispered, voice brittle in a way that startled even him. I didn't mean, she started, but his sharp tone cut her off. Don't do that again. The command was cold, absolute. But beneath the steel, Olivia saw something else flicker in his stormy gray eyes. Fear. He wasn't angry at her. He was terrified. She raised her hands in surrender. I won't, sir. I'm sorry. His shoulders dropped a fraction, but the tension still clung to him like a second skin. You can go. Olivia turned, walking carefully back toward the door, her heart pounding against her ribs. But as she closed the door behind her, Nathan remained standing in the middle of his office, staring at the spot where she'd touched him. He brought his fingers back to his neck. Her touch still burned there. And for the first time in 20 years, he didn't want it to stop. The touch that shouldn't have happened. The whispers traveled faster than Olivia's own footsteps. By the time she returned to her desk, the air in the office had shifted. Eyes lifted discreetly from monitors, conversations stopped mid-sentence. The usually subtle office buzz had been replaced by a quiet, almost reverent tension. People weren't just watching her. They were watching him. Through her. She pretended not to notice, lowering herself into the soft leather chair beside her workstation. Her hands trembled faintly, and she tucked them beneath the desk to hide the shaking. The warmth of his skin still lingered on her fingertips, like an invisible residue she couldn't wipe away. Her first day, and she had already committed the one act that was practically legendary throughout Kingsley International. She had touched Nathan Kingsley. Hey, a voice whispered beside her. She turned to see Max Turner, head of legal, leaning casually on the edge of her desk. His tie was slightly crooked, his coffee cup perfectly balanced in one hand. So, you lived? Barely. Olivia tried to force a smile, but it came out thin. Max lowered his voice even more, casting a quick glance toward the closed door of Nathan's office. Do you have any idea what you just did? She exhaled slowly. Fixed his tie. Max shook his head, almost pitying her innocence. No one touches him. Ever. Olivia frowned. Yes, I've gathered that by now. But why? He acts like I set him on fire. Max gave a small chuckle. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some say it's just one of his billionaire quirks. Others, well, they have theories. His voice dropped conspiratorially. Trauma, heartbreak, betrayal, you name it. Olivia crossed her arms, her brows tightening. That sounds ridiculous. Max shrugged. Maybe, but one thing's not up for debate. He hasn't let a woman get that close to him in 20 years. Until you. She swallowed hard. 20 years. The number sat like a stone in her chest. Max straightened. Careful, Olivia. Around here, you don't want to be the woman who breaks his rules. Before she could respond, the red light on her desk phone blinked. Claire's voice came through the intercom, calm and clipped. Miss Harper, Mr. Kingsley wants to see you. Now? Max arched an eyebrow. Well, good luck. The whole room seemed to hold its breath as she stood. The short walk to his office felt longer this time, like the marble floor was stretching under her feet. Her heart pounded with every step, but she kept her chin up, fingers tightening around the folder in her hands. The door was half open. Nathan stood behind his desk, his back toward her, staring out at the sprawling Manhattan skyline as though the view could somehow steady him. The late morning sun poured through the glass, outlining the rigid set of his shoulders. She knocked gently on the doorframe. You wanted to see me, Mr. Kingsley? He didn't turn right away. But when he did, his eyes landed directly on hers, sharp and assessing. Yes, his voice was low, even, controlled, but she heard the slight hesitation beneath it. Come in. Olivia stepped forward, closing the door behind her. There was silence between them for a long, loaded moment, The only sound was the faint hum of the city below. "I assume you know why I called you in here," he finally said. She took a breath. "Because I fixed your tie?" His jaw tightened. "Because you crossed a line." She felt her pulse quicken but kept her voice steady. "With respect, sir, I was trying to help. You were tying it wrong. I don't require your assistance." "No," she said softly, but firmly. "You require distance." His eyes narrowed slightly at her audacity, as though no one had ever dared to say such words aloud to him. For a brief, dangerous second, neither of them spoke. And then something shifted in him, a flicker of internal struggle, quickly buried. "Do not mistake my tolerance for leniency, Miss Harper," he said coldly. "There are boundaries in this office. Do not test them." Olivia felt the heat rise in her chest, but she bit her tongue. She knew better than to push further. "Not yet." "Yes, sir." He turned back toward the window, as if dismissing her, but then paused. "Do you know why I hired you?" The question surprised her. "I assumed because I'm qualified." "You're qualified," he agreed, his voice quieter now. "But qualifications aren't what made your name land on my desk." Olivia stood very still, unsure how to respond. Finally, he continued, "You're not afraid." The words hovered between them. "You're the first candidate who sat in this office and didn't flinch when I questioned your competence. You didn't fumble or retreat. You stared back." Her breath caught. "And that's a problem?" "It's inconvenient." She dared to take a small step closer, lowering her voice. "Then why keep me?" For the first time since she had met him, Nathan Kingsley's carefully guarded expression cracked. "I don't know." The confession was so quiet she almost wondered if she imagined it. The phone on his desk buzzed suddenly, snapping the moment like breaking glass. He straightened instantly. "That will be all, Miss Harper." She hesitated, searching his face one last time, but his walls were already back up, cold and impenetrable. "Yes, sir." As she exited, closing the door behind her, Olivia felt the weight of what had just happened press down on her chest. There was something fragile beneath his control. And whatever it was, she had touched it. Nathan remained standing long after she left. His hand instinctively rose to his neck again, where her fingertips had barely grazed his skin. It was maddening. He should feel revulsion, anxiety, the old sickness that used to flood him at the mere thought of physical contact. But there was nothing. No panic. Only the soft echo of warmth. And that, more than anything, terrified him. Because it meant one undeniable truth. Something was changing. And he no longer had control. Chapter 2. Infist and lines, unspoken rules. Nathan didn't sleep that night. He had stared at the ceiling for hours, arms rigid at his sides, as if afraid his own body would betray him again. The memory played in an endless loop. The warmth of Olivia's fingertips, the sudden softness in her voice, the unexpected calm instead of the old, familiar storm inside his chest. It was impossible. The rule had kept him safe for years. Touch was danger. Touch was vulnerability. Touch was loss. And yet, here he was, unraveled by a woman who hadn't even tried to break him. By morning, the city was wrapped in pale gray mist, and the office floor glowed faintly under the dim lights when he arrived. Earlier than usual, earlier than anyone, except her. Olivia Harper was already there. She sat quietly at her desk, reviewing schedules with a cup of tea balanced between her palms. The soft hum of music played faintly through her earbuds, her lips moving slightly, unconsciously, as she mouthed the words. She hadn't noticed him yet. And for one dangerous moment, Nathan allowed himself to simply watch. The calmness in her posture, the gentle way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she bit her lower lip softly when reading something complicated. Details, dangerous details. His chest tightened with a mixture of irritation and fascination. He should not be noticing these things. Not her hair loosely falling over her shoulder, not the way the morning light softened her features, not the quiet confidence she carried like armor. And yet, there she was, quietly rearranging his perfectly constructed world with nothing more than her presence. As if sensing his gaze, Olivia finally looked up, Their eyes met for half a second before she removed one earbud and offered him a polite, neutral smile. "Good morning, Mr. Kingsley." Nathan cleared his throat, straightening his posture. "You're early." Her smile widened just a hint. "First week, trying to set a good example." He nodded once, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Your dedication is noted." But even as he spoke, his mind drifted again. To yesterday, to her hand rising toward his neck, to the electricity that had sparked in that impossible moment. He needed to stop this. He needed to shut it down before it spiraled. By midday, Nathan's office was humming with activity, as meetings stacked back to back. Olivia moved between departments with effortless precision, managing calls, organizing schedules, and even handling minor crises without needing to escalate them. Daniel Foster, the CFO, leaned against Nathan's office doorframe during a brief break, sipping his coffee with mild amusement. "So, the new assistant," Daniel said, his tone light but clearly baiting. Nathan didn't look up from his laptop. "Yes." "She's interesting." Nathan's jaw flexed. "Is there a point?" Daniel grinned. "You seem unusually attentive lately." Nathan's eyes finally lifted, sharp and cold. "Careful, Daniel." "Careful?" Daniel chuckled, unfazed. "Nathan, you haven't so much as breathed near a woman for 2 decades, and now you're watching her like she's made of glass. People notice. I am perfectly capable of managing my staff." Daniel tilted his head, studying him. "You always were. But this isn't management." His voice softened slightly. "It's discomfort. And you don't do discomfort, Nathan." Nathan stood abruptly, ending the conversation. "We have a quarterly board meeting in 10 minutes. I suggest you prepare." Daniel smirked but took the hint, raising his hands in mock surrender before exiting. But the truth was already echoing inside Nathan's head. Discomfort. He hadn't felt discomfort in years. He hadn't allowed himself to. And now, with Olivia Harper, it was all coming back. Later that afternoon, Nathan summoned Olivia into his office under the guise of reviewing the upcoming investor presentation. She entered with her usual grace, closing the door quietly behind her. "You needed me, sir?" Nathan gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit." She did, crossing one leg over the other, notebook ready, expression composed. But she noticed it, the tension hanging between them like an unspoken thread, stretched and taut. He steepled his fingers together, choosing his words carefully. "I want to establish a few ground rules." Her brows lifted slightly. "Yes," his voice was clipped. "We will keep all interactions strictly professional. No unnecessary conversations. No informalities. And..." His voice hardened ever so slightly. "Absolutely no physical contact. Ever." Olivia exhaled slowly, nodding once. "Understood, Mr. Kingsley." But then she tilted her head, studying him with quiet boldness. "Permission to speak freely?" Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Granted. You hired me because I don't flinch, because I don't get intimidated." Her voice was soft but unshakable. "But now you're telling me to shrink into silence." His stomach nodded at her accuracy. "I'm not asking for personal conversations, sir," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "But you should know, I'm not afraid of you." Nathan's heartbeat stuttered, but his face remained stoic. "I am not concerned with fear." "No," she said softly, her eyes holding his. "You're concerned with control." For a brief moment, the walls around him cracked again. She saw it, she felt it, but she didn't press further. Instead, she offered him something unexpected, a small, warm smile that carried no threat. No challenge, only calm understanding. "Don't worry," she said as she stood. "I'll follow your rules." She turned and exited, leaving him sitting alone, the quiet click of the door echoing louder than any argument. As the office emptied that evening, Nathan remained at his desk, staring out at the city lights below. He had faced hostile boardrooms, billion-dollar deals, and cutthroat negotiations without blinking. But one woman, one assistant, one accidental touch, and everything inside him was unraveling, like threads slipping through his fingers. The invisible lines he had lived behind for so long were no longer protecting him. They were trapping him, and Olivia Harper had just stepped across them. Chapter 3. The Tie Incident. Again. Nathan Kingsley didn't like losing control, and that's exactly what Olivia Harper was doing to him. Not intentionally. That's what made it worse. She wasn't manipulative. She wasn't seducing him with coy glances or reckless ambition. She was simply present. And that presence was slipping past every defense he had so meticulously built. Every day since the first touch felt like another crack forming in the dam. The problem wasn't that he noticed her. The problem was that he noticed everything. The soft hum of her voice when she greeted the staff each morning. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear while reading complex contracts. The faint trace of vanilla and cedarwood that followed her when she passed his office. Small, irrelevant details, or at least they used to be. Now, they lived inside his head like dangerous echoes. That morning, Nathan stood in front of the floor-length mirror in his private office suite. His reflection stared back with the same unreadable expression he had perfected for decades. Yet even his reflection looked strained. He reached for one of his ties, navy, silk, and tried to knot it. His hands moved with mechanical precision. Over, under, through, but halfway through his fingers stumbled. The knot came out uneven, sloppy, almost comically so. Nathan exhaled sharply and tried again. The silk slipped awkwardly through his fingers. The more he tried to fix it, the worse it became. It was as though his own body was rebelling. Frustrated, he dropped his hands and let the tie hang loosely around his neck. A knock broke the silence. "Come in," he called. The door opened quietly. Olivia entered, holding a folder of revised investor reports. "Good morning, Mr. Kingsley." Her voice was calm, light, but it carried a strange gentleness, as if she sensed something was off. He gestured toward the documents, careful to avoid eye contact. "Leave them on the desk." She complied, setting the folder neatly before him. Her eyes flickered briefly to the crooked mess of silk still hanging from his collar. Then, without hesitation, she spoke. "May I?" Nathan's chest tightened instantly. "No," but she was already stepping closer, ignoring the sharpness in his voice. "Just the tie, sir. I promise not to make contact." He opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught somewhere between his mind and his throat. She stood inches away now, her hands raised like a surgeon preparing for delicate work. Her fingers hovered just above his chest. No touch, but close enough that his skin tingled with the tension. Olivia worked swiftly and skillfully, looping the silk, pulling it through, adjusting the knot with perfect precision. The scent of her perfume reached him again. Warm, familiar, utterly destabilizing. "There," she whispered softly, stepping back. "Perfect." Nathan exhaled slowly, only now realizing he'd been holding his breath. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Something electric pulsed between them, something fragile, dangerous, undeniable. And then, to Nathan's horror, he found himself speaking words he hadn't planned. "You're very capable." Olivia smiled, not triumphantly, but gently. "Thank you." It was such a simple exchange, and yet it left his heart pounding like he had just stepped into an uncontrolled freefall. After she left, Nathan sat heavily behind his desk. He loosened the tie immediately, but it wasn't the fabric choking him. It was her. By midday, his work suffered. Numbers blurred. Emails went unanswered. His meetings felt hollow, his mind pulled back towards something that both fascinated and terrified him. He wasn't supposed to feel anything anymore. And yet, there she was, breaking him down without even trying. Later that afternoon, Daniel entered without knocking. "Nathan," he said casually, dropping into the chair across from him, "you're off your game." Nathan didn't respond. Daniel watched him for a moment, then smirked. "Let me guess, it's the assistant." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Don't start." "I'm not starting. I'm observing. You don't know what you're talking about." Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. You hired her because you thought she was safe, professional, emotionally detached. But she's not." Nathan's eyes narrowed dangerously. Enough. But Daniel wasn't deterred. "You've spent 20 years locking yourself behind rules. You built this empire by keeping everyone at arm's length. And now, one woman, one tie, and your whole system's starting to crumble. Nathan's silence was answer enough. Daniel sat back, his voice softer. She's not breaking your rules, Nathan. You are. Nathan stared out the window, his reflection barely visible in the evening skyline. For years, the absence of touch had been his shield. Touch led to betrayal, to weakness, to pain. But Olivia's touch, it didn't feel like any of those things. And that was what terrified him most. That night, long after the office lights dimmed and the city glimmered below, Nathan stood once more at the mirror. The navy silk tie still lay neatly folded on the dresser. For 20 years, touch had meant danger. But now, he wasn't sure what it meant anymore. And as much as he wanted to retreat, he also knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 4. First Public Appearance. The invitation landed on Olivia's desk with an elegance that didn't match its weight. Thick, ivory cardstock, gilded edges, the black calligraphy inked with surgical precision. The Kingsley International Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Saturday, 7 p.m., the Waldorf Grand Ballroom. Olivia turned the envelope over in her hand, her brow furrowed. This wasn't part of her role, or so she thought. A knock on her doorframe startled her. Claire Benson stood there, arms folded. Her usual calm professionalism masked something. Concern? Amusement? Pity? "I'll want you there," Claire said simply. Olivia blinked. "Me? As his assistant?" Claire's lips twitched faintly. "As his date." The words hung there like forbidden fruit. Olivia felt her throat tighten. I didn't agree to—" "You don't say no to Nathan Kingsley," Claire interrupted gently. "And besides, you might want to reconsider, assuming you know what this is." Saturday arrived like an approaching storm. The Waldorf's marble entry gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. Luxury cars lined the front steps. Camera flashes strobed like lightning as the city's most powerful gathered beneath the domed ceiling. Inside the gilded ballroom, champagne towers shimmered, waiters glided between circles of billionaires and politicians, and string quartets played soft symphonies that failed to calm Olivia's racing heart. She wore a simple black evening gown, thin-strapped and graceful. The dress wasn't extravagant, it was deliberate. Elegant, understated, impossible to criticize. She didn't belong here, not in a room where money dripped from every diamond cufflink. But when Nathan arrived to collect her from the private suite upstairs, she forgot how to breathe. His tuxedo fit him like it was sewn onto his frame. Sharp, flawless, perfectly composed. His black bow tie was straight, the silk catching the light, and his hair swept back in the style that made him somehow look both older and younger at once. But it wasn't his appearance that shook her, it was his eyes. For the briefest moment they softened when they landed on her, just enough to make her stomach flutter, just enough to make her forget how cold he usually was. "You look—" he hesitated, as if searching for a word he didn't normally allow himself to say. "Appropriate." Olivia lifted an eyebrow. "That's your version of a compliment?" His lips twitched faintly. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." They descended into the ballroom together. His hand hovered near her lower back, but never touched, yet his nearness alone was enough to make her hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. Heads turned. Of course they did. Nathan Kingsley didn't bring dates, not here, not ever. The whispers began instantly. "Is that his new assistant? She's different from the others. Poor girl, she'll last a month. I heard he hasn't touched a woman in 20 years. Their words pricked at Olivia's skin like tiny invisible needles, but Nathan didn't react. His expression remained carved in stone as they made their rounds through the sea of billionaires. He introduced her only when protocol required it. "Olivia Harper, my executive assistant." Each introduction was cold, formal, yet somehow protective, as if he was trying to shield her from the vultures circling. And then she arrived. Vanessa Quinn. Tall, statuesque, and dressed in a blood-red gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers. She moved through the crowd like a practiced performance, her sharp eyes already locked on to Nathan. The ex-fiancé, the betrayal. Olivia knew immediately. Vanessa approached with the kind of smile designed to cut. "Well," her voice dripped with false warmth. "Nathan, I never thought I'd see the day." Nathan's jaw flexed, but his voice remained composed. Vanessa. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Olivia, scanning her like merchandise. And this must be your assistant? Olivia extended her hand without hesitation. Olivia Harper. Vanessa took it with a squeeze just a bit too firm. You're braver than most, Olivia. Olivia smiled sweetly. Well, some people run from difficult things, others face them. Vanessa's perfect jaw tensed, but she recovered quickly. Nathan's eyes flickered briefly toward Olivia, a flash of something almost like pride crossing his guarded features. Don't worry, Vanessa said smoothly. Nathan has always been difficult. You'll learn. She let the threat hang like perfume before turning and gliding away. As soon as she was gone, Olivia whispered under her breath. Subtle. Nathan exhaled quietly. She feeds on reaction. You denied her a meal. Olivia risked a sideways glance. Is that a compliment? He allowed himself the faintest nod. It's survival. The rest of the evening passed like a controlled performance. Olivia handled the conversations, the pressure, and the stares with a grace that surprised even herself. And Nathan watched. Not as her boss, as something else entirely. He admired the way she refused to shrink beneath the weight of the room, the way her smile disarmed the curious wives, the way her calm unnerved the powerful men who tried to patronize her. She was steady, unbothered. She didn't need his protection, and yet, he wanted to protect her anyway. By the time they finally left the gala, the city streets were quiet. The ride home was silent at first, the tension sitting between them like a third passenger. Finally, Olivia broke it. So, did I pass the test? Nathan's eyes remained on the road. It wasn't a test. She smirked. Could have fooled me. Silence again. But then, so softly she almost didn't catch it, he said, You handled yourself well. Her heart skipped. It was as close to praise as Nathan Kingsley gave. When the car pulled up to her building, Olivia hesitated before reaching for the handle. Good night, Mr. Kingsley. He turned to her fully now, his gaze more open than she'd ever seen it. Olivia. Her breath caught. For a second, she swore he was going to say something else. Something that would cross the line neither of them wanted to admit existed. But instead, he only said, Sleep well. She stepped out into the night air, the door shutting behind her with a gentle click. And Nathan sat there, watching her silhouette disappear into the building. His fists clenched tightly on his lap. The wall was cracking, and he was losing. Chapter 5. Positive Instincts. Nathan Kingsley had spent years mastering silence. Silence was power. Silence kept people at a distance. It made them cautious, predictable, manageable. But silence had become his enemy, because now it was filled with her. Every quiet second was louder than any boardroom debate, louder than the ticking clock on his office wall, louder than the hum of the elevator when she entered each morning. Her laugh lived in his head. Her voice was a constant echo. The way she had faced Vanessa that night, calm, fearless, almost protective of him, haunted him more than he dared to admit. Olivia Harper was everywhere, and Nathan Kingsley was losing control. 2 weeks had passed since the gala, and the shift was undeniable. He found excuses to call her into his office. Small tasks he could have easily assigned to anyone else. A file review, a schedule adjustment, a signature on something he'd already approved. It was pathetic, and he knew it, but every moment she stood across from him, calm, composed, her eyes steady, chipped at his defenses like soft waves eroding stone. And then came the trigger, the moment that would finally rip something open. The company was hosting a quarterly investor briefing, a necessary evil. Nathan stood near the bar during the reception afterward, forced into polite conversation with board members, while Olivia floated gracefully between groups, checking details, speaking with partners. But it wasn't her professionalism that caught Nathan's attention. It was the man standing far too close to her. Andrew Warren, a junior partner in one of the firm's consulting divisions, young, ambitious, polished, and far too comfortable. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he watched Andrew lean slightly toward Olivia, saying something that made her laugh. A soft, genuine laugh that Nathan knew well. Andrew's hand rested lightly on Olivia's elbow. It was innocent, polite, and yet Nathan's stomach twisted in a way he hadn't felt in years. Possessiveness. It hit him like a drug. Sharp, dangerous, irrational. He set his untouched drink on the bar and started moving before his brain could stop him. Olivia sensed him approach even before she turned. Nathan's presence was like a storm front, silent, heavy, electric. "Mr. Kingsley," Andrew greeted, straightening instinctively under his superior's gaze. Nathan didn't respond. His attention was solely on Olivia. "Miss Harper," he said, voice quiet but edged with something darker. "I need a moment. Now." She blinked at the sudden tension, but nodded politely. "Of course." Without waiting for Andrew to excuse himself, Nathan guided Olivia away from the crowd, his hand hovering dangerously close to her back but never making contact. "Not yet." They stopped in a private hallway, away from the noise. Olivia faced him, calm but curious. "Is everything all right, sir?" Nathan's jaw flexed. He had no plan, no logical reason for pulling her away. All he knew was that seeing another man stand that close to her made something primal rise inside him. "You seemed occupied," he said flatly. Her brow arched slightly. "I was answering a question about the quarterly projections." "You were laughing." Her lips parted slightly. "Am I not allowed to laugh, Mr. Kingsley?" His pulse kicked harder. The quiet way she challenged him always threw him off balance. "You don't need to entertain him," he said, voice lower now. "Or anyone." Olivia studied him carefully. "Is this a professional concern or a personal one?" The question hit harder than he expected. He took a small step closer. Close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. Close enough that one more inch would cross the boundary he'd sworn never to breach again. "I don't like being tested," he said quietly. Her voice softened. "And I don't like being controlled." For a moment, neither of them moved. The pull between them was a wire drawn tight, one breath away from snapping. Nathan could feel his resolve slipping. The years of distance, the walls, the rules, all unraveling beneath the simple gravity of her presence. Finally, Olivia spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "If this is about your rule, Nathan, say it." He froze. She had never called him by his first name before, and the sound of it on her lips. It broke something wide open. Before he could stop himself, his hand reached up, almost instinctively brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. It was barely a touch, a whisper of contact, but it was enough. Her breath caught. His fingers lingered for the briefest second longer than they should have. His heart pounded in his ears. And then, he pulled back, as though the heat burned him. "This is a mistake," he said hoarsely, retreating several steps. But Olivia didn't flinch. She didn't move at all. She only watched him, her eyes full of something far more dangerous than anger. Understanding. And that terrified him most of all. The drive home that night was brutal. Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, knuckles pale beneath the leather. He could still feel her skin against his fingertips. It hadn't repulsed him, hadn't triggered the old sickness. It had felt natural, right, and that was precisely the problem. Because every time she touched him, every time she stood close, she peeled away another layer of armor. He was standing on the edge of something he didn't know how to survive. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Kingsley wasn't sure if he wanted to survive it at all. Chapter 6, The Fallout. Nathan Kingsley was unraveling, and he hated himself for it. After the incident in the hallway, he had done what he always did when the world threatened his carefully controlled order. He retreated. The next morning, he arrived earlier than usual, locked in his office before the staff even began filtering in. Meetings were rescheduled, calls rerouted, paperwork reviewed alone. He spoke through intermediaries, leaving Claire to handle what Olivia normally would. And Olivia noticed. Of course she noticed. For 2 full days, Olivia Harper was left to orbit him like a planet around a dying star. Close enough to feel the gravitational pull, but always just far enough to be held at a distance. He was avoiding her. Intentionally, methodically, cowardly. By the third day, the whispers started. The office was always a breeding ground for rumors, but now the tension was thick enough to touch. Did she do something wrong? I heard he won't even look at her anymore. He's never avoided anyone like this. Olivia stood outside Nathan's office late that afternoon, her hand hovering above the door handle. No intercom this time. No appointment. Just her. She'd had enough. Knocking twice, she stepped in before he could grant permission. Nathan looked up sharply from behind his desk, startled by her bold entrance. "Ms. Harper, we need to talk," Olivia said, her voice steady but gentle. His jaw clenched. "This isn't necessary." "Yes, it is." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Nathan exhaled and gestured for her to close the door. She obeyed, but didn't sit. Instead, she stood across from him, refusing to hide behind the distance anymore. "You've been avoiding me," she said softly. Nathan's gaze dropped to the desk, but only for a moment. "I've been busy." "No," she countered. "You've been running?" That hit harder than he expected. "I am not running," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm trying to maintain—" He struggled for the word. "Boundaries." Olivia took a careful step forward. "And what exactly do you think you're protecting yourself from?" Nathan's breath hitched. Her tone wasn't accusing, it was compassionate. "Dangerous. From something I cannot allow," he whispered. "Allow?" she repeated softly. "Nathan, you act like letting someone close is a weakness." He stood suddenly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "Because it is." His voice wasn't loud, but it was raw. "Do you think this is easy for me?" His eyes locked on hers, wild for the first time. "Do you think I enjoy this? You walk into my office, into my life, and suddenly, everything I've held together for 20 years begins to crumble." He ran a hand through his hair, the mask slipping further than it ever had before. "I can't afford to feel this way." Olivia let the weight of his words settle, but she didn't back away. Instead, she closed the remaining distance between them until only inches remained. Her voice lowered to almost a whisper. "Then don't call it weakness." Nathan's breathing was uneven now, his pulse roaring in his ears. "I am not the person you think I am," he said, voice trembling. "I know exactly who you are," she replied softly. "And you're the one who can't see it." Her hand rose instinctively, this time not toward his neck but toward his chest. She stopped, her palm hovering just over his heart, never making contact. "You survived betrayal. You built an empire. You've carried this weight for years. But you are still human." Nathan closed his eyes, his chest heaving beneath the phantom touch. "Don't," he whispered. "I'm not touching you," Olivia said gently. "You won't even let me." Tears threatened behind her voice, though she held them at bay. "I'm not your past, Nathan," she whispered. His throat tightened. Her hand lowered slowly. "I am not Amelia." At the sound of that name, that ghost, his eyes snapped open. The wall he had built so carefully over the years shook at its very core. He could no longer pretend. She knew. The silence between them became unbearable. Finally, Nathan spoke again, his voice hoarse, almost breaking. "You don't know what you're asking." "I'm not asking for anything," she replied. "I just want you to stop running." And then, because she couldn't stop herself, she whispered the words that would leave him more exposed than ever. "Let me in." But Nathan Kingsley did what he always did when the world became too terrifying to face. He took a step back, and then another. And then, with a voice sharp and cold again, he said, "This was a mistake." Olivia's heart cracked, but she didn't cry. "Not here." She nodded slowly. "If that's what you believe." He couldn't meet her eyes as she quietly walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. "But you should know something." She turned slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "I wasn't trying to break you, Nathan. You're doing that all by yourself." And then she left. Nathan stood alone, his hands trembling at his sides. The room was quiet again, but the silence no longer protected him. Now it only exposed what he couldn't hide anymore. He was falling, and he didn't know how to stop. Chapter 7. Breaking Point. The office was colder without her. Nathan hadn't realized how much Olivia's presence had colored the sterile glass walls of Kingsley International until she wasn't filling the space with her calm steadiness anymore. She still came to work, of course. She still performed every task with sharp precision, arriving early, staying late, never missing a single detail. But she wasn't there. Not really. Her smiles were polite now, mechanical. Her voice stripped of the soft warmth that had once disarmed him so easily. She never lingered when speaking to him, never allowed their eyes to lock for more than a professional glance. And Nathan felt every inch of that distance like a physical wound. He had told her it was a mistake, and now she was giving him exactly what he claimed to want. Distance, boundaries, silence. My God, it was unbearable. Daniel noticed first. He always did. "You're torturing yourself, you know," Daniel said one afternoon, casually leaning against Nathan's office door while sipping his afternoon coffee. Nathan barely looked up from his screen. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Nathan's jaw flexed, his patience thin. "Stay out of it, Daniel." Daniel only sighed, studying him. "You know, for a man who's spent years building walls, you forgot the most important rule about fortresses." Nathan finally glanced up, irritated. "And what's that?" Daniel's smile was faint but sharp. "Walls don't keep you safe, they just keep everyone else out." The days dragged like wet cement. The more Nathan tried to focus, the more Olivia haunted his thoughts. It wasn't just her voice or the way she used to say his name. It was everything. The way she defended him at the gala. The way she stood firm when everyone else tiptoed around him. The way she had whispered, "Let me in." Nathan barely slept, and when he did, he dreamt of her. Her eyes, her touch, or rather, the lack of it, because he wouldn't allow it. Still, the memory of his past hovered behind everything. Amelia's voice, cold and final. "You were never enough." The betrayal had become his blueprint, his protection. Until Olivia. Friday came like a final test. The office was quieter than usual as Olivia prepared the boardroom for an executive meeting. Nathan arrived early, for once not because of work, because of her. He watched from his doorway as she adjusted the placement of bottled water, straightened notepads, checked the projector cables. Her hair was pulled back today, simple, elegant, effortless. And then it happened. Andrew Warren entered. Again. And this time, Nathan didn't need to hear their conversation to feel the pressure building inside him. Andrew leaned in slightly, saying something that made Olivia offer a faint smile, but not the smile Nathan had seen before. This one was distant, measured. Still. Andrew's hand brushed her arm lightly as he spoke. The same subtle, polite touch from weeks ago. But this time, Nathan's restraint shattered. He was on his feet before his mind could stop him. The distance between them vanished as Nathan crossed the room, his voice coming out sharper than intended. "Miss Harper." Both Olivia and Andrew turned, surprised by his sudden presence. "Sir?" she said evenly, her face unreadable. "I need a word, now." Olivia paused for a heartbeat before nodding. "Yes, Mr. Kingsley." Andrew stepped back awkwardly. "We were just—" Nathan didn't even acknowledge him. His eyes were locked on Olivia's as he gestured sharply for her to follow him. They walked down the long, private hallway leading toward his executive suite. Neither of them spoke until they reached the inner office. Nathan closed the door quietly behind them. The silence inside was thick, charged. Olivia stood calmly, folding her arms as she waited for him to speak. Nathan's pulse hammered beneath his skin. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked, his voice low but trembling with something barely contained. Her brows lifted slightly. "Doing what?" "Letting him," his voice cracked, "touch you." She inhaled softly, but her expression remained measured. Andrew was being polite, nothing more. Nathan's fists clenched at his sides. "I don't like it." The words escaped before he could control them. Olivia's voice softened, careful but deliberate. "You don't like it because it makes you uncomfortable or because it makes you jealous?" Nathan's breath caught. The word hung in the air like a live wire. He couldn't deny it, but admitting it felt like walking into a fire. Instead, his voice dropped lower, breaking at the edges. "I can't explain it." "You don't have to," Olivia whispered, stepping closer now. "You just have to be honest." He shook his head, his body rigid, fighting everything that warred inside him. "I told you." "This is dangerous." "For who?" she asked softly. "For you? Or for me?" Nathan's composure slipped. "For both of us." The distance between them was gone. They stood now just inches apart. Neither moving, neither breathing. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes, fighting an internal battle he was rapidly losing. And finally, before he could think, before the weight of 20 years could stop him, Nathan closed the gap. He kissed her, desperate, unrestrained. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't careful, it was surrender. Olivia froze for only a moment before responding, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket, pulling him closer, like she'd been waiting for this breaking point as long as he had. The world outside his office disappeared. The walls he had spent years building were gone. There was only this, only her. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Nathan's hands still trembled where they rested at her waist. He opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to retreat, to fix the uncontrollable thing he had just allowed to happen. But Olivia shook her head softly, silencing him. "Don't," she whispered. And for the first time in years, Nathan Kingsley didn't run. He simply stood there, terrified, exposed, completely undone. Chapter 8. The Ultimatum. The kiss changed everything. And yet, in the days that followed, Nathan Kingsley pretended nothing had changed at all. He returned to work like clockwork. Meetings, reports, board presentations. His world of precision didn't skip a beat. But inside him, nothing was the same. The echo of her lips still burned against his skin like an imprint. What terrified him most wasn't that he had kissed Olivia Harper. It was that the world didn't end afterward. There was no collapse, no betrayal, no ruin, just silence. And that silence was unbearable. Olivia, meanwhile, remained steady. Or at least, that's how she appeared on the surface. She performed her duties flawlessly, professional, calm, polite. But the distance was intentional now, and Nathan knew it. She was waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to face it, waiting for him to stop hiding behind his fortress of control. By Friday, the weight was too much to carry. Nathan found himself watching her again, not just admiring, but studying. The curve of her jaw as she answered calls, the way her brows furrowed slightly when reading dense legal contracts, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear when she concentrated. These small, quiet habits tormented him. They weren't just details. They were pieces of her that lived rent-free inside his mind. And he couldn't escape them. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. Late that evening, as the office emptied out, she knocked gently on the doorframe of his private office. Nathan looked up, exhausted and hollow. "We need to talk," she said softly. He hesitated, but then nodded. "Come in." She entered, closing the door behind her. This time, she didn't stay across the room. She walked right up to his desk. Direct. Fearless. Nathan held his breath as she spoke. "I need to know what this is, Nathan." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce, filled with something heavier than anger. "It was pain. You kissed me, and then you went right back to hiding." Nathan stood slowly, swallowing hard. "I've been trying to protect." "Protect who?" she interrupted gently. "Me? Or yourself?" The words hit like a blade. He wanted to answer. He couldn't. Olivia exhaled, her voice trembling slightly now. "I can't keep walking on this tightrope, Nathan. I won't." Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "I deserve better than confusion, better than fear. I deserve truth." Nathan's hands tightened at his sides, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," Olivia pleaded, her voice breaking. "Tell me what you're so afraid of." Nathan's defenses cracked once more, his voice barely above a whisper now. I've been betrayed before, I've let someone in before, and she destroyed me. The confession hung there, raw and exposed. Olivia nodded, her voice soft but unwavering. I'm not Amelia. I know that, Nathan whispered. Then stop punishing me for what she did to you. His throat tightened, the air sharp in his lungs. I don't know how, he admitted, finally breaking completely. I don't know how to let this happen without losing myself. There it was. The truth? His greatest fear wasn't love. It was losing control. Losing the identity he had built brick by brick out of pain and survival. Olivia's voice softened even more now, almost like a whisper. Nathan, you already are losing yourself. Oh. She stepped closer. But maybe that's not the tragedy you think it is. Nathan's eyes closed tightly, as if her words hurt more than any physical wound. I can't promise you it'll be perfect, Olivia whispered. But I can promise you I won't run. Not like she did. Tears stung behind Nathan's closed eyes. He could barely breathe. And then she spoke the words that forced the final choice. But I won't stay halfway. I can't. Her voice cracked now, trembling as she continued. If you want me, you need to choose. All of me or nothing. The silence that followed was brutal. A lifetime of walls stood between them, trembling under the weight of his indecision. Nathan's chest heaved as he finally opened his eyes. His voice came out hoarse, strangled by fear. Maybe it's best if we end this before we both fall. Olivia froze, her breath caught in her throat, and then slowly she nodded. Her voice was calm but broken. Then you've made your choice? She turned toward the door. And this time, Nathan didn't stop her. He stood frozen as the door clicked shut behind her, leaving him once again in the sterile silence of his own prison. But this time, it didn't feel safe. It felt like suffocation. He had pushed her away. Again. But this time, she might not come back. Chapter 9. Total collapse. The silence was no longer his sanctuary. It was his prison. Nathan sat alone in his penthouse that night, surrounded by nothing but the muted hue of the city lights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan glittered outside, alive and distant as he now was from the only person who had managed to reach him in years. Olivia was gone. Not physically. She still worked in the same building. She still carried out her duties with flawless precision. She still passed him in the hallway, offered polite nods in meetings, scheduled his appointments without missing a detail. But her, the woman who once smiled at him with quiet warmth, who once stood inches from him and whispered, "Let me in," that woman was gone. And she wasn't coming back. Nathan hadn't slept in days. Sleep meant facing the dreams. And the dreams were worse than the waking hours. In every one of them, Olivia stood just out of reach, always looking at him, always waiting, always slipping away. He woke up each time gasping for air, his chest tight, his pulse racing like a man drowning in his own regret. The office was no better. He avoided the boardroom, avoided the break room, avoided every place where Olivia might be, and yet every corner of the building still smelled like her. Every glance from the staff carried unspoken judgment he couldn't block out. Even Daniel had stopped trying to speak reason into him. One morning, as they crossed paths in the executive hallway, Daniel simply looked at him with quiet disappointment. "You've built an empire, Nathan," Daniel said softly. "But you've lost the only thing that actually mattered." Nathan didn't reply, because he already knew. By Friday night, the weight was unbearable. And then came the final blow. Nathan sat on his couch, another untouched glass of scotch in his hand, staring at nothing until his phone buzzed. A photo? It sent anonymously, but it didn't need a sender. The image was crystal clear. Olivia, sitting at a small corner table at one of the city's quieter bars, laughing, relaxed. Her head tilted toward a man seated across from her. Andrew Warren again. His hand rested lightly on the small of Olivia's back as she leaned forward, speaking, smiling, the kind of ease Nathan had never allowed himself to offer her. Nathan's throat closed. The image blurred as his vision swam. His grip on the glass tightened until it cracked beneath his hand, a thin fracture slicing through the crystal. And still, he couldn't breathe. For years, Nathan had convinced himself that keeping people out would protect him from pain. But as he sat there, suffocating in the emptiness, he finally understood something far more devastating. There was no pain greater than losing what you never allowed yourself to have. He stood suddenly, his chest heaving, moving without fully thinking, grabbing his coat, his keys, his phone. He didn't care what hour it was. He didn't care how pathetic it looked. He didn't care that she had every reason to hate him now. He just knew one thing. If he didn't go to her tonight, he would lose her forever. 20 minutes later, Nathan stormed into the small bar, ignoring the glances that followed him. The moment his eyes landed on Olivia, everything else faded into white noise. She saw him instantly, her laughter dying mid-sentence. Andrew turned as well, confused at first, until he recognized who stood in front of them. Nathan didn't give him a glance. His eyes were locked entirely on Olivia. "We need to talk," Nathan said, his voice low but shaking with the weight of everything he hadn't said for weeks. Olivia's face remained calm, but her voice was cool. "I don't think that's necessary, Mr. Kingsley. Please?" His voice cracked. "Just 5 minutes." Andrew stood protectively beside her. "Is there a problem here?" Nathan's jaw tightened, but he forced his tone to remain steady. "No. This is between me and her." Olivia glanced between them. For a long, tense moment, she said nothing. And then finally, she exhaled softly. 5 minutes. Nathan led her out onto the sidewalk. The city buzzed around them, but inside this moment, the noise barely existed. Olivia crossed her arms as she faced him. "You've made your decision already, Nathan," she said softly. "I respected it." Nathan shook his head, breathless, desperate. "I was wrong." Her brows lifted. "That's not enough." "I know." His chest heaved. The words burned his throat, but they tumbled out now, raw, unfiltered. "I was afraid of losing control, of falling, of opening myself to something I couldn't manage." His voice broke. "But none of it matters anymore, because losing you hurts more than anything else ever has." Olivia's eyes softened, but her face remained steady. "Nathan," she whispered, "you've always had a choice. You still do." Her voice cracked slightly. "But if you're only here because you're afraid of losing me, that's not love, that's panic." Nathan stepped closer now, shaking his head. "Yeah." He swallowed hard. "I love you." The words landed between them like thunder. Soft, quiet, but deafening. Tears stung behind Olivia's eyes, but she didn't speak yet. She needed more. She needed truth, not desperation. And Nathan saw it. His voice lowered to a whisper. "I love you not because I'm scared to lose you. I love you because you're the only thing that's ever made me want to stop running." His voice cracked again, barely holding together. "And I don't want to run anymore." For the first time in weeks, Olivia's defenses trembled. And in that moment, she whispered the only words that would force him to prove himself. "Then don't. The grand surrender." A grand surrender? The entire office stopped breathing the moment Nathan Kingsley walked through the front doors. Not because he was early. Not because he was late. Because he was different. No custom-tailored suit today. No perfectly starched collar. No polished shoes clicking sharply against the marble floors. Instead, he stood there barefoot, hair slightly disheveled, a plain black sweater clinging to his frame. And in his hand, a massive bouquet of deep crimson roses. The CEO, the man who had built his empire on discipline and distance, standing completely, beautifully undone. Whispers rippled across the floor like wildfire. "He's lost his mind." "What is happening? Is that for her?" Every eye followed as Nathan crossed the floor, not slowing for a second. Straight toward her, toward Olivia Harper. Olivia froze at her desk. Her heartbeat hammered in her chest as she stood slowly, watching him approach. He stopped directly in front of her. Close. Too close. Just like before. But this time, he crossed the line. Nathan reached out, gently taking her hand. Warm, solid, unapologetic. The entire office stared in stunned silence as Nathan dropped to one knee. Right there, in front of everyone, Olivia's breath hitched. Her vision blurred as he looked up at her, no longer the guarded CEO, but simply Nathan. His voice trembled, but his eyes never left hers. "I was a coward," he whispered. "I pushed you away because I've spent my whole life believing love was dangerous." He swallowed, his voice breaking slightly. His grip on her hand tightened. "You showed me that real love isn't about control. It's not about walls. It's not about..." His voice lowered to a raw, tender whisper. "It's about choosing someone. Every day, even when you're terrified." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she struggled to breathe through the storm in her chest. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring shimmered beneath the office lights. He looked up, voice shaking as his confession poured into the quiet room. "Olivia Harper, I don't want to spend another second hiding from what I feel for you." His voice cracked fully now. "I love you, completely, helplessly, and if you'll have me, I want to spend my life proving that." He drew a shaky breath. "Will you marry me?" The office went dead silent. Even the sound of the city outside seemed to vanish. All eyes waited for her answer. But Olivia didn't speak right away. Instead, she smiled through her tears. Soft, warm, the same way she had always looked at him, only now he was finally brave enough to meet her there. "Of course I will, you idiot," she whispered. And the office erupted. Applause, laughter, gasps. Even Claire clutched her chest with a soft smile, blinking away tears. Daniel leaned against the far wall, shaking his head with a quiet grin. "Took you long enough," he murmured under his breath. Nathan rose, slipping the ring onto Olivia's trembling finger. Then, without hesitation, without fear, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Fully, publicly, without a single piece of the man he used to be. The kiss wasn't desperate anymore. It was free. The whispers continued long after. Some called it crazy. Some called it reckless. But those who truly understood called it beautiful. Because the coldest man in the city had finally let himself be loved. And it had saved him. The rain whispered gently against the windows as Nathan stood near the altar, watching her. His bride, his wife. Olivia walked slowly toward him, dressed in ivory silk that caught the light like morning sun. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Not of fear, not of uncertainty, but of peace. Of something earned. Nathan had never been more sure of anything in his life. Not business. Not power. Not wealth. Only her. When Olivia reached him, he took her hand, this time without hesitation. The tremble that used to live in his fingertips was gone. His touch was steady, secure. The guests disappeared behind the fog of emotion as the pastor began. In his vows, Nathan's voice shook, but only because of the depth behind every word. "I spent years building walls, Olivia, thinking that if I kept the world out, I couldn't be broken again. But then you walked into my life, and without even trying, you broke every rule. And I finally understood. Real love isn't safe. It's not perfect. It's surrender. And I want to surrender to you, every single day for the rest of my life." When she whispered, "I do," Nathan finally felt something he never thought possible. Freedom. The kind of freedom only love could give. That night, as they danced beneath soft golden lights, Olivia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart, a heart that, for the first time in 20 years, no longer belonged to fear. Nathan whispered into her hair, "I wasted so many years running, Olivia. But you waited. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. And now, I finally know what it means to stay." Sometimes the hardest battle isn't falling in love. It's learning that you're worthy of being loved in return. And when you finally stop running, you discover the safest place isn't behind walls. It's inside someone else's heart. What did you feel watching Nathan and Olivia's journey? Have you ever built walls to protect your heart, only to realize love asks you to tear them down? If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. And remember, real love waits, real love fights, real love stays. Subscribe for more beautiful love stories that remind us, even in a world full of brokenness, healing is still possible.